Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Wednesday 11 a.m. show. Today we got beautiful questions about the hip. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. So today the question is about the neutral hip. What are the cues that you use to inform someone how to feel the neutral hip? As well as the second part of the question is, how does the hip change between a squat versus a deadlift?
All right. So first things first, let's focus on the first part of the question, which is what is a neutral hip and how do you cue or how to make sure somebody learns what a neutral hip is. So first of all, there's stuff that you can do in your hips and with your hips. So when your hip is moving, either to the front or to the back or in the middle. That's the first one. And the second one, which is about the second question, squatting and deadlift, where the hip itself is moving. Like, is it moving backwards or forward? That's literally everything, or yeah, that's literally everything your hip can do. First things first. So the neutral hip, everybody knows the overarching position of a hip. So when you're in a whatever stripper pose, overarching pose, like when you let your hips travel forward, you're kind of in a weird overarch position. That's the one that happens when you're tilting forward with the hips. Tilting backwards with your hips means you're tucking your hips underneath, which automatically happens at some point when you squat down, right? So when you're in a resting position, like when you're either pooping in the woods or resting on the ground and eating, that's an eating position for most cultures out there, outside of Europe. Then your hip is literally being tucked under. That's a super relaxed position for your hips because your hamstrings are relaxed, your glutes are relaxed, everything's super relaxed. Everything in between is neutral hip. And in my training world, the only position that can be loaded is the neutral position. So neither the overarch position nor the tuck position is made for being loaded. All right. That's why I'm only focusing on the neutral hip. How can you cue this? So the easiest thing to start with is let somebody stand upright and just tell them squeeze your glutes. That is a neutral hip. For most people, this will feel super unnatural, right? Just standing straight and squeezing the glutes will make them feel like they have a rounded back or literally their hips are being tucked under because they're so used to overarching now that a normal position, a neutral position feels super weird to them. Stand straight, squeeze your glutes. That's a neutral hip, right? Um, the next step is super simple. Take a few steps without letting your glutes go. That's harder than it sounds, right? So squeeze your booty while walking. And then we're going to do the same thing with a carry, whether it's a farmer carry or a Sempe carry. And then we're going to go into more complex stuff like squat and deadlift. We're going to talk in a second. So that's a neutral hip. Again, that's the only position in your hip that should be loaded from top down. No loading of an overarch position, no loading of a butt wink, pooping in a wood, resting position, backwards tilt hip position. Can you repeat the second question?
The second question was the hips in a squat versus a deadlift.
So here's the cool thing. If you know how to maintain a neutral hip, you just have to move that hip somewhere now. So in my world, there's no squatting or deadlifting. In my world, there's only okay. I need to put or I need to let the neutral hip travel from a standing position to like everybody would say like a squatting position, right? So travel the hips from here back down to here and back to the starting position. That's it. That's all your hip should be doing, can be doing. That's it. And yes, we're gonna practice it with squatting and deadlifting, obviously, but that's not the main point. Technique of a deadlift is valuable, but the base is keeping a neutral hip throughout. That means if you're squatting down, hip in a neutral position. If you're squatting up, hip in a neutral position. If you're deadlifting up, hip is in a neutral position. That's it. That's why it's so important to learn how to keep your hips neutral. And the main contributor, muscle wise, is at first the glutes, and then we're gonna go downstream to hamstrings and whatever's following afterwards.
Okay.
That's it.
Yes, if you don't have anything to add.
Nope. I'll try to keep it simple today. Um, so, short summary of today. A neutral hip is when your glutes are squeezed. The challenge is it's hard to squeeze your glutes when you're shooting your hips back,
Mm.
right? That's why we see so much overarching, etc. Like, but that's the practicing part of training. That's what training is for. That's what we use the box squat. That's why we maybe raise it up at first, so you can literally work your way down and work. That's maybe a good third question is how do you improve your neutral hip from a standing position going to the whatever squatting down position is we use the box squat a lot, whether that's with a barbell or a sandbag, depends on the person in front of us. We're just gonna raise it up. That means you start with a neutral hip. I'm just gonna observe what's happening. Whenever a hip is gonna move somewhere, that's where we're gonna stop and go like whatever 3 5 centimeters lower, right? We're not in the medical world. We're in the training threshold world. That means we have to work exactly in between the picture perfect uh, looking squat, the neutral hip, and oh, you're gonna get injured,
Mhm.
right? And we're working exactly in between. So we're not gonna stop when you look like super perfect. I want to know when your hip starts to tilt, and then I'm gonna give you whatever 3 more centimeters, so we can actually work on muscles getting engaged and getting all the good stuff. Because if we always finish picture perfect, guess what? There's no change gonna happen. Because if you squat picture perfect, that means you're not literally not working on it. That's just the way it is.
Mhm.
Sweet. That's it for today, guys. Bring on the questions. Awesome questions, by the way. I love answering questions, and hopefully I'll provide some solutions for your problems. That's the only job I have right here. Um, Bring them on. Send it on Instagram, email, school, traveling circus, wherever you find us. I love questions. See you guys next week.